Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. Today, before I start the lecture, let me ask you, I had actually suggested a small experiment or an assignment for you to do, and that related to trying to write down the reasons for any product that you have purchased or have been interested in purchasing. With that, I'd asked you to also write down the factors that could have influenced you in buying that product. For example, it could be possible that you were interested in buying a laptop and you consulted a friend of yours who's more knowledgeable in that area. Maybe he influenced you, or maybe some ad influenced you. So that was the particular aspect that I wanted you to record for yourself. And the third thing I had asked you to do was to try and see if there is any reason which could make you change your decision. The idea was to try and get you to understand how consumers behave or think. By this small experiment, what we were trying to figure out is to suggest, as literature and marketing suggests, that most of the time we really do not think through the reasons or the factors that influence us or may change our behavior. The idea behind this all is to enforce this point from the point of view of the marketers. If you're going to be the marketing man or lady, that you need to understand, you need to get to understand the consumer. But as we most probably have discovered from this small experiment, sometimes even the customers are not aware of why do they buy, or what are the reasons they're buying the product, what could be the things that influence them, and so on and so forth. Now, before I formally start the lecture, let me recapitulate what we discussed the last time. If you recall, we had gone through suggesting the importance of the consumer behavior as well as what is consumer behavior through definitions. We then decided on that there are two types of consumers, the household as well as the organization, so we should be very clear on that. Then along with that, we discussed a few concepts which are very relevant and tells you how marketing has evolved and how thoughts have moved forward. In that, we had discussed the production concept, citing Henry Ford. Then we had gone into the product concept. Then obviously an outcome of the product concept is the selling concept, and from there we came into the marketing concept. And it was this point that we took some time to understand what really it stands for. The basic assumption under the marketing concept is that if a marketer can understand the consumer, what the consumer really wants, then he, as a marketer, is in a better position to satisfy the consumer need, and which will obviously lead the consumer to be retained by this marketer. And it is here that we were talking about competitive advantage. Now, basically, again, just to recapitulate, competitive advantage is anything that one company gives to a customer which is of a higher value, which another competitor cannot match, and it is because of that value that the customer stays with the marketer. And every company has this goal that it should retain its customers and would not have to, let's say, acquire new ones. The reason basically is that acquiring a new customer is more costly, while keeping your own customers is relatively cheaper. And profit motive requires you to reduce your cost while you satisfy your customers. From here, we had moved on to the concept of customer value, which I told you we will discuss a little bit more so that we understand as marketers what should we be doing and how does this consumer behavior course set into this frame of consumer value. We will go into that. Then once we had discussed this customer value, satisfaction, retention, we moved on to a bit of an issue that surrounds the marketing people. We talked about a little bit, not very detailed, but globalization process, where the tremendous change in terms of the number of products now available to any consumer has gone up. Not only that, we have been able to actually suggest that there is a very simple method of purchasing now. You do not have to think about boundaries. We gave an example of Amazon, where we realized that any product that you really want to buy, you can actually go on to the Amazon, particularly if it's a book, you can order it and the book will be delivered to you. Obviously, you need to have the source of making the payment, which is normally a credit card. Now, given this, along with the ethical issues that I specifically stated, that when we are talking about wants of consumer and trying to satisfy, the issue that a marketer finds himself confronted with is, should the marketer give everything that the customer wants? If he wants drugs, is it justified for the marketer to provide that kind of a thing? Then we have environmental issues. We have to be very careful that while we are trying to satisfy the customer's needs, we need to be careful in trying to making sure that we do not harm the society at large, and obviously that's an important criteria. Finally, while we were coming to the conclusion, I had shown you a model which was basically consumer behavior model, and it related to all the aspects that we had been discussing from the very beginning, starting from the question that a consumer wants to ask himself or herself whether we want to buy this product, when to buy, where to buy, how to buy, and so on and so forth. And along with that, we also came to the conclusion that there is a point at which the company must move in to influence that. And for that purpose, we had suggested that there is a marketing strategy framework used through the, acronym, and that acronym was STP. The idea was that there is segments where normally every group of people within the segment try and buy similarly, and they behave in a similar manner. Since they have similarities within, it becomes logical for the marketer to find that segment which he or she can satisfy. That is what we were talking about when we were discussing the concept of segmentation. And I had suggested at that time that we will be discussing what do you do while you are doing segmentation. And naturally, to be able to segment, you need something called research. And today's topic really relates to research. But before I go into the research concept, I need to develop a clear understanding of what is value. Finally, in this lecture, at this time, I will be presenting to you another model which is specifically given in your book. So if you have your book, course book, which is Consumer Behavior by Kanuk, you will be able to see it in figure 1.1. And if you have it in front of you, then while I'm discussing the model, it will be very easy for you to understand all this. So I was just mentioning to you that we would be talking about the model, but before I go into the lecture, let me recapitulate the definitions that we had discussed and try and link up the definition with the competitive advantage concept and link it up together so we understand why we are going to be doing consumer research. Now, there were two definitions I had mentioned. One is related to your book, and the book definition suggests that behavior, consumer behavior, is defined as the overall behavior that a consumer displays in searching for the product, in acquiring the product, then consuming and obviously disposing of the product. But there is another definition which is more comprehensive and tries to cover all aspects, and that relates to the decision-making process. Now, the issue is, what's the difference between the two, the decision-making process or the behavioral process? So the difference between the two, we can see it from a very simple example now. Let's say if the person wants to search for information, or he is going to go into search for a product, then the first thing he would possibly be doing is looking for some information. Now, here is where behavior moves in. Now, behavior can be, he can go to his friends, he can go to an expert, he can also look at a magazine or maybe watch TV to try and gather information. So between the two definitions, both cover the aspects, but if you combine them, I think you will be able to understand it in a better manner. So we have more or less discussed all the things that we had done in the last session. Now I will be coming into the area of the value. And we need to recapitulate what is the basic concept of value, and we have to understand the value systems. Customer value. Now, it's very simple to understand, but you need to put a little bit of an attention to this area. Value has to be, we had discussed it last time, that value is the difference between the cost that a person bears and the benefit that he gets out of it. To simplify this, let me show you on the slide, and I will change these two concepts from the cost frame to the revenue frame to willingness to buy frame and willingness to sell frame. Now, obviously, this relates to the whole companies, and at the top, we have the willingness to buy of the consumer, and at the bottom, we have the willingness to sell of the organization. Let's understand it in a simplistic form. When a company finds that the price at which it is trying to sell, it will make a profit, it will only sell at that price. On the other side, the consumer will only buy if he thinks that the price that he is paying gives him some value. Now, we have therefore two extremes from the point of view of the consumer as well as from the point of view of the organization. Now what happens? Let's say a price is fitted in between the two. Simple, you fit in the price. Now, if the price is above the willingness to supply for the organization, it is the profit that goes to the organization. On the other side, if there is a gap between willingness to pay and the price that the customer has been asked to pay, then that value between the price and the willingness to pay will become the profit of the consumer. And this is where we need to focus. So we need to focus on this particular aspect of the value chain. That means the difference between the price that the customer is required to pay and his willingness. Now, let's go a little further and try to explain how can that happen. We obviously understand that if the company or the marketer is providing the person with higher value and the person recognizes this value, naturally, as his value increases, he will be willing to pay a little higher price for it. So the willingness to pay will keep increasing, particularly if the company keeps the price at the same level. Now, as the gap between the price and the willingness to pay increases, the value to the customer will go up. Logic suggests, very simple logic, that a person who has or is receiving higher value from whatever the other companies are supposed to be providing him, then he will stay loyal, in the sense he will be satisfied, and if he is satisfied, he would like to continue to stay with this company. And in a simple form, we can say very simply that this company, which is providing this kind of value, increasing value, has a competitive advantage over any other firm. Therefore, in market or marketing, this is where we should focus. This will be our focus constantly. So when we discuss how to increase the willingness to pay for a consumer, naturally, we have to understand consumer behavior. Unless we understand consumer behavior from this point of view of what really matters to this consumer, we cannot do it. So we slowly have to build our knowledge to this point where we can say that our company, or as marketers, we have been able to give the customer more in terms of willingness to pay, so that the gap in the value system increases. Obviously, if you look at the screen, we will be able to see also that the cost at which the company is selling the product, or the price at which the company sells, and the cost at which the company is producing the product will obviously be the company's profit. And logic says that if the willingness to pay goes higher, a price a little bit more increased will keep the gap in the value area. Obviously, the customer is still receiving high value with a little price increase, and the company on the other side will make a profit. Therefore, it logically goes both ways, that as you continuously increase the consumer's willingness to pay, even with a little higher price, the consumer will still pay. Now, here is a good example that I want to give you. A few years back, you most probably are aware of a brand called Tag Heuer. That's a watch brand. And if you see that, normally we will find that in Pakistan also, it's now being advertised. This brand was being sold at $150 at a point of time. And, well, the company thought that it had a particular value into it, and therefore they were selling it. But based on certain amount of research that the company did, what happened? The company came to the knowledge that obviously the people were ready to pay a higher price for this product. So they increased the price to $1,500, approximately within that range. And would you believe it that that sale of that company went up by 700%? That means 7 times. Now, how did it happen? Nobody knows. But I'm quite sure that the company had undertaken research and got to this point to understand that their product had a very high intrinsic value, and the customers were ready to pay for that higher value. Now, just to confirm this logic again, let me give you another example from a case which is very critical in understanding this area. There was a company in America, and it was selling chemicals. Now, this company was doing all right. I mean, it was making all the sales. Therefore, they thought that the reason for their success lies in their technology or the quality of their product. Mind you, it's a chemical company, so they were selling in terms of tons of chemicals. Now, the chief executive thought that since our quality is good, he invested a lot of money in improving the quality. Now, I may not give you the exact number, how many $1 million that he invested, but approximately 6 to 7 million was invested in trying to improve the level of quality. So they invested, they went into improvement of quality, they went into a lot of product improvement, so on and so forth. And then the chief executive decided to let's go and check in the market how is our product doing in terms of quality. So they carried out a little survey. Now, this survey, when the findings came in, the data came in, it suggested, lo and behold, they saw the finding and it said, no. They had actually asked a question, for example, how do you rate the company's product in terms of quality? And they found that their product, their chemical, was rated the lowest. Now, that was a shock to this company. Why? They had invested in millions in improving their product quality, but the market said, no, your quality is the lowest. But the company was still selling the product. So the question was, why was the customers buying this product? So they went back again. Something they should have done before, but they went back again into the market and they checked what was the reason that the customers were buying from them. So they found a very interesting thing. They found that most of the large companies were selling their products in bulk, which means not less than, let's say, 10 metric tons. But this company was ready to sell even 1 to 2 metric tons. Now, obviously, why were the companies buying from this chemical company? Because they could manage their inventory in a better manner. Instead of investing for 10 metric tons, they could invest in one and then get another 1 ton and get another 1 ton whenever that were required. This provided a very interesting concept. And the concept comes into position is this, that unless you research and you really discover why consumers buy and what do they really want, you will not be able to succeed. And not only you will not be able to succeed, the issue will be that most probably a lot of money will be spent and wasted, which is not something that a company wants to do. Now, this example of the company is very interesting also. It leads us to the concept of what I was saying. What was the value that the customers were looking for? Naturally, in this product area, they were looking for inventory management and not quality. So they were quite happy by buying small lots as well as, repeatedly giving the business to the company. But watch again, that the company had mistaken their competitive advantage in terms of quality, which was not their competitive advantage. That advantage belonged to the large companies which had really high quality. So we are coming back to the same concept of how should we find out, or should we really find out what is the value that the customer is asking for? And should we really know how much the customer will be ready to pay higher amounts for the same product? Yes, we need to do that. And we will be doing that by the lecture today that we will be taking, and that is on consumer research. And by this small example, I have actually tried to demonstrate that consumer research is an important tool. Now, consumer research is not something that is formally to be undertaken by hiring a company. Most probably, there is a lot of information that is already available in the company, which can become the starting point to carrying out some kind of a consumer research on it. But I will try and take you into the important areas which we will be looking at from the point of view of consumer research. Now, there are two paradigms, basically, which we normally recognize. We are not going into too much details, but we'll look at what is a paradigm first. Paradigm is a broad area of concepts put together, or theoretical frames put together, which creates a system. So in research also, we have broadly two research methodologies or paradigms that we call them. One is the qualitative research methodology. The second one is the quantitative research methodology. Now, both have their own functions, they have their advantages, and they have their disadvantages. But briefly, we'll look at qualitative research. Qualitative research is basically, please remember one thing that I normally find people trying to get confused. Qualitative research does not mean that there will be no statistical analysis done on it. That's not the point. The point is there is a method of collecting information. There is a method of approaching a problem. So in the area of qualitative research, we normally approach it more in terms of not hard numerical data, but more non-numerical data. Now, in terms of this qualitative, we normally use 2 or 3 methods for doing this kind of a thing. For example, focus groups. You most probably have heard about them. That is the normal one of them. The second one is in-depth interviews that we do. What is an in-depth interview? You sit across the person whom you are interviewing, and there is no formal frame of the interview. What you are trying to do is to try and actually grasp whatever you can from whatever his information that is coming out of him. Normally, these are done by experts, and it's not done by everybody. So we have to be able to understand that. And it is also basically the interview is done, and then this interviewer has to interpret all this information on his own grounds. And that is the same thing what happens with focus groups. Now, that is why this is also called interpretist. That means you interpret whatever the information that you are capturing. And obviously, when 2 people are taking interviews, they could maybe come to different conclusions based on their own involvement in that. And because of this framework, we normally tend to suggest that this kind of research is not generalizable, but it helps us to explore issues. Now, what is generalizability? Generalizability particularly means that if I find a person talking to me, let's say, and I try and discover that the intention of this person is that if the price will be lower, he will buy, does not mean that everybody will buy because the price has gone low. So this is more context specific. That means it stays within the context of the interviewer and does not go far from there. On the other side, one more technique that we know is there, which is called ethnography, which means basically that the person who is carrying out this research, individual lives within that system, records everything, sees everything, interviews people, and then comes to a conclusion as to whatever the phenomena is. While we are discussing this, let's also try and ask ourselves, what is the purpose of research? Now, research has broadly three purposes. This will not be in the book, but I'm trying to put this back to you so that you are clear as to what purpose would you be doing while you're doing consumer research. Now, there are three purposes to research. One is description, which means it tends to describe whatever is happening. So we normally tend to describe what is going on, what is happening. This is one aspect of research, one goal of research. The second goal, basically, of research is to be able to predict something, which means there is an if and then relationship or a cause and effect relationship, and you say, if this happens, then this is most likely that will happen. So research tends to give us this kind of an idea. And finally, the research is what we call for the purposes of control. And I'm talking about business aspects of research, which means there is a phenomena, we need to control something, or for example, we need to control the behavior of the consumer. The consumer, we are interested in getting him to buy the product, therefore we would like to influence him. This kind of research suggests how can we do it. Now, if we keep these three things in mind, we should be more clear as to which area would be more logical and what kind of research paradigm we can use or methodology we can use. So qualitative, I've already discussed. Now I'll give you a brief frame of what is quantitative research. Now, quantitative research is basically what is more closer to cause and effect. It does description. It does more or less all of the things. So that is why we're trying to focus more into quantitative research. Now, quantitative research is basically you collect data, you collect information, and then you use some statistical tools. This information is normally in numerical frames, and based on this numerical frame, we normally tend to carry out statistical analysis. And once we have the analysis done, we can look at the results and then come to a conclusion. Now, like I said, these could be in terms of any one of these things. We could be actually describing an event. We may be interpreting something in terms of its behavior. So we are trying to say, if we do this, then this is possible. And that relates to basically, and if I link it up with the consumer behavior research, this is what I'm trying to suggest, that basically I'm going to say, if I advertise more, I will be able to create a brand image. And because I can create a brand image, obviously I will increase the brand equity, and brand equity will increase brand loyalty. So quantitative research is focused in particularly these three areas, which is what I have just been able to describe. Before I go into a little bit more detail on quantitative research, I would like to explain what is the most important or major issue that one faces when one wants to carry out research. And that is to be able to define the objective of the research. We need to be very clear. And this clarity can only come when the marketer himself is clear as to what does he want to find in his research. Now, within this context, setting the objective of research is important. For example, do we want to find out what will be the effect of price drop? Do we want to find out what is the kind of value that a consumer is seeking in the product? Do we want to find out what will be the impact of a particular promotional campaign? So on and so forth. Now, whatever it is, the issue of defining the objective is paramount. And particularly if the marketer is going to hire an external researching company, then it has to be very, very specific in trying to do that. Here again, I'm going to give you an example. Burke Marketing, a firm which has been, I think, second or third largest in America doing research, consumer research. They were approached by a company who had already, and let me warn you again, I mean, this is what I'm trying to say. this company had already invested $2 to $3 million in developing their promotional campaign. Now, once they had developed it, somebody suggested in the company, let's have it evaluated in terms of its impact, something they should have done before anyway. So they went to Burke Marketing, and it transpired that Burke Marketing finding was that this campaign is not good. So what did the company do? That company had to stop the campaign, and it refused to go forward with it. In that process, they lost money. So again, we come to the same conclusion that we need to be very clear. We need to decide when to do research, what kind of research is required to be done, and then set the objectives in relation to the company which is going to actually to carry out this research. So the point is that the objective has to be clearly laid down. Now, try and understand also very clearly, and I'll give you an example in trying to understand how can we develop a particular objective and target it into a particular area. Now, we know that there are a number of points that can be researched. I'm not sure whether you will be able to understand at this point what is a concept. So we need to look at the word concept. Concept is something which is more abstract, which means it's more hypothetical. Now, research cannot be done in hypothetical areas. For example, I cannot carry out research in suggesting what makes a customer satisfied. Now, it's such a broad area of research. What I need to do is to bring this broad conceptual area from a high level to a variable which can actually be measured. So we are interested in something that can be categorically measured. Now, one measure of customer satisfaction can be his repeat purchase. So if we want to find out whether this consumer is buying repeatedly, and we want to find out what percentage of the population is a repeat purchaser, we should be able to get a good idea of how satisfied our customers are. So the point what I'm making here is that we need to be able to set an objective which is measurable and not an objective which is not measurable. And broadly speaking, concepts are non-measurable, but variables which explain the concept can be measured. So think about it when we are doing this kind of work in the future. Now, let's go back to the concept of quantitative research. Now, quantitative research, I told you, unlike the qualitative where interpretation is required, in quantitative research, it is what we call more empirical, which means we need to have evidence in terms of some data, and that is why we also call it positivist. Positivist means that we can actually measure something and from there draw our conclusions. So in the context of the positivist, we need to go for data which can be collected from a number of methodologies. So we will be discussing that in terms of the research design. Now, in data collection, obviously, because that is what we are coming into, is there are a number of methods by which we can collect data. Now, one of the methods is normally we carry out survey. And the second method is to carry out experiment. The difference between the two, we should be able to very broadly understand this. Do remember that to understand the cause and effect relationship, which means what causes an impact on a dependent variable. So we have two variables. One is independent variable, which tends to have an impact on a dependent variable. So if we want to find that, remember in your mind that only experiments do that. And unfortunately, when you carry out an experiment, then again, the generalizability gets limited because it is within a controlled atmosphere in which you carry out this experiment. Experiments normally, what they do is that they want to observe an impact on the dependent variable. So they maneuver or manipulate the independent variable. By changing the independent variable, they keep measuring what is the impact that is going to happen on the dependent variable. When this happens, you can develop a cause and effect relationship. So experiment is the only method by which we can confirm a cause and effect relationship. But like I said, this has got limited use because it has to be within a particular context. Now, to explain this, let me explain this a little bit more. Let's say we want to find out whether positioning on a shelf has an impact on purchase behavior. And for that purpose, let's say we select 4 or 5 retail outlets, and on these outlets we try and first see whether purchase, whatever the purchase is, so we record that information, and then we shift the product of our interest and we change the shelf space. That means we pick it up from the higher point and try and put it at the lower end, and then see whether the product is still being sold or people are still buying that product, and this just to check the impact of shelf placing. Now, remember again that the kind of retail outlets that you have chosen, the sample that you have picked up becomes the area in which it can be generalized. For example, you cannot take the same concept and apply it to macro or to metro, because there the context is totally different. But if we are doing the experiment in a small perchun ki dukaan, for example, then we need to know that it will relate only to the area of the perchun ki dukaan. And that is where the generalizability becomes a little weak. So we cannot extend it to all kinds of purchase situations. Now, experiment is one. The third method of trying to do quantitative research is observation. Now, it is considered to be a very important tool, and as technology has grown, we have been able to apply this technology in a very diversified manner. For example, in Pakistan at this point, for your information, there are households which have agreed to have their systems recorded by, in terms of the kind of viewership that they have of the television programs. Which it basically means is that the company which is doing this research has given them devices, and that device constantly records the channels as they are shifted by the household, so they can get a correct picture that at what period of time which channel was being watched for what purpose. So we know that observation is very important in this context. Now, let me also explain why is it significant. Because, like I told you in the very beginning, a consumer sometimes does not even know why is he doing something. So by observation, one can figure out what is going on. Sometimes even people may not even tell the right thing, not because they're lying, but because they never realized what they are doing. Good examples are two, and I'll give you both of them. There was this company, an inn company, which means they had a hotel chain. Inns are the smaller type of hotels which are normally used by people who travel regularly on the highways. So this company decided to find out how does the family make a decision of where to stop or where to have the food. Now, they called in a focus group. So they got the people to get together, and as they were getting together, they asked them, well, who makes the decision when you want to go to a restaurant? And lo and behold, what happens? The husband puts up his hand and says, well, I decide. That's my decision where we stop for food. So they said, okay, so what do we do now? So they asked them again, what happens? Who makes the decision of which hotel or inn to stop when you are traveling long distance? Oh, again, the husband cuts up his hand up and says, oh, I do it. Unknown to these people, obviously they had been told that they had already put devices in the cars which were traveling to record whatever discussion was taking place between the husband and wife. And when they looked at the tapes or the recording that was done, it was discovered that every time it was the lady who was deciding which restaurant to stop for or which hotel to stay for the night. In the same context, we have another company called Xerox, and they were doing the same kind of research because they wanted to somehow or the other improve the performance of their copying machines. So Xerox is the company which is recognized as the pioneer in the copying system. So what they did was they tried to interview the employees of a large corporation to find out how do they use the photocopying system. what do they find? They find exactly what was expected of them, and that is that the employee exactly laid down the manual frame which was given to them, the manual which was given to them how to use a machine. So they repeated exactly what the manual said. For example, if the manual said that we need to wait for 2 minutes before the photocopying process should start, they said we wait for 2 minutes. And if the person said that in one go you should only copy, or the manual said that in one go you should only copy 50 pages, then they said, well, we copy 50 pages. What then did this company do? They put cameras along the corridors or along the places where photocopying was being done, and they started recording the system. And after about a fortnight, what they discovered was that all the employees were doing everything which was against the manual. Nobody wanted to stop for 2 minutes before the machine was ready to start. Nobody wanted to wait for 50 at a time, so they were putting 100 copies going through, so on and so forth. So point is that sometimes to be able to know how people use a product, when they use the product, observation may become a critical tool. And like I told you, because of technology coming in, we are now more aware of the possibilities of applying these tools and concepts. We have a data collection method which is known as survey. Now, survey, you most probably are quite aware of it, is simply a questionnaire which is developed, and these questionnaires are distributed to the target population for which you want to carry out the survey. And at the end of this, you collect all the data, and using statistical techniques, you are able to come to certain conclusions. So what survey methods do we have? We already have a good idea. Can be done through personal interviews in which the questionnaire is structured. Now, what happens is that the questionnaire is already there. You sit down with the person that you want to survey, and you get the answers all ticked as you want them, not as you want them, but rather as the answers are given for every question you do it. Normally it is done where maybe there is time gaps or educational level frameworks or language gaps, so that you can do it yourself, depending how much time do you have. On the other side, you can also have a survey sent through mail. So you can send the survey to the people that you want to carry out the survey on, or the population, sample population. Once you send these surveys, then you expect the return to come to you. Now, obviously, if you are carrying out a personal interview, then that is more productive. On the other side, if you send it by mail, it may not be returned to you, so it may be less productive. On the other side, a personal interview will take longer time, naturally, because you have to talk to each one of them. But in case of survey, you can send it to a number of people and get whatever information that you can collect. So there are pros and cons between both the aspects of the survey techniques. Now, the third survey method is that you can do the same interviewing, that is the person interview, on a telephone. Now, obviously, we must understand that the number of questions that are included on a telephone will become very difficult, because nobody wants to hold the telephone to the ear and give all the answers. But in a survey, a mail survey, yes, you can have a larger context, because the people may have time to sit down and get the survey filled up, and so on and so forth. One more method that we have in carrying out these surveys done is mall intercept, which means that you go to a shop or a place where people normally buy, and you stand there, and as the people are coming out, you may request the person for a quick personal interview, have the questionnaire filled up, either by the person himself, or you might record all the answers, so you can collect the data in this format. Normally, in terms of survey questions, which you need to remember, the questionnaire becomes very important. I've already mentioned to you that this being a metric-oriented survey, which is quantitative, therefore, it is very critical that the questionnaires or the questions should be formulated in such a way that you collect metric data on it. This we will discuss when we go for one of the assignments, or when you're doing your assignment, most probably it will be presented there, and you would need to carry this kind of a survey out. But try and remember that you can have a number of methods of collecting data. You can have a simple question like yes and no. You can have a simple question like male, female, or you can also have a question regarding the attitude scales, like we say. So we have metric scales. We can have Likert scale, where you can ask the opinion of a person regarding a particular statement and range it on 1 to 7, 1 being not agreed or 7 being really agreed, so on and so forth. So there are attitude scales, and in your book there is a complete page on which these various types of scales are listed. So you need to go to these scales and look at them, and you will find that most of the scales have numerical values assigned to them. This makes descriptives more easy. This makes cause and effect relationships, or let's say if and then predictive relationships, more sensible. Now, having talked to you about the kind of data that you can collect, we're leaving out one thing, and we should not, and that is that there is something called secondary data also, which is very important. Now, secondary data is normally the data which pre-exists in the system. What I'm trying to suggest is that you do not really have to, or any marketer may not necessarily have to always go for marketing research in terms of hiring a company and paying a lot of money to get the same information. What you can do is that look at your records. Now, it is possible that you can have the sales record available, which can show you the trends. You might get information available from your salespeople on various behaviors. You can get complaints that people are sending in, and that could become a major point in which you should be able to carry out your own analysis and may come to a conclusion. But again, remember that unless the objective of the research is clear, then all the amount of data that you can have will be of no use. So we need to be very clear as to what is the objective of the research, what kind of data do we require, what methods do we have to collect the data, and which will be the most convenient out of that whole lot. So there is a number of steps that you want to take before you can come to a conclusion as to what kind of research would you like to undertake. Now, briefly, I've already discussed qualitative in the initial section, but just to put down again the kind of data that you can collect from this system, the qualitative system, or the qualitative methodology. And I will just focus on one, and that is focus group, because that is commonly what is associated by people when they think about carrying out some kind of research. And also remember that using a combination of focus group with quantitative data makes the research more significant, particularly if you are interested in getting some information. Number one, first, when you don't know something, you're not very clear, so focus groups move in. They will help you define the problem in a better manner, to focus the problem, and based on that, you should be able to go and get the survey done. And survey का एक फायदा जो है वो ये है कि it is generalizable. Why? Because normally you get section data. Sectional data means that at one point of time you collect information regarding a particular phenomena, so you can, based on certain concepts, make it more generalizable. Now, focus group normally, if you remember, we collect about 7 to 8 people, and then we allow the people to respond and give their own opinion without any check or any control on what they are saying. Normally it's recorded, but this is normally done by people who are experts. From there, like I said, we get the focus of the issue, and then when we go into the research area, we can then develop questionnaire on it, and then we can develop our instruments and so on and so forth. Here we are coming to the final area of this consumer research issue, and that is the issue of validity and reliability. Now, this is directly linked with the instruments that we have, and we should be very clear of what these two things mean. Now, validity suggests that the instrument that you have, or whatever the information that you are gathering is really relevant to the question at hand. That means it is valid in terms of getting you the required information, which is more significant. And this information is significant from the point of view of what is the purpose of the research. So it has to have a direct link with that information. Now, what is reliability? Now, reliability basically means that whatever information is being gathered, if you use the same instrument and ask the same question from the same sample again, you will most probably get the same answer. And that means that this instrument is reliable in terms of its repeated correctness of the information. Doesn't mean that what is reliable is also valid, but it certainly means that these two put together develop the information which is going to be accurate in terms of helping you to solve the problem. Now, we have come to the end of the lecture, and I'll quickly briefly go over what we have discussed so that we are clear at what the issues that we have faced. Now, basically, I introduced the last lecture, and now I'm coming to the point of having started the discussion on consumer behavior research. Before that, I gave you a major detailed information regarding the value, customer value, what is competitive advantage. Then we moved into consumer behavior research, and I discussed two paradigms or two methodologies, which is quantitative research and qualitative. And briefly, I've tried to capture the import, और जिसको कहते हैं उसका जो मुद्दा है वो मैंने I put it in front of you so that we are exactly sure of which kind of research methodology would we use, under what condition. But don't forget that the objective of the research has to be clear before we can even start deciding the research design or the methodology that we would like to pick up, and we need to be very clear on these issues. Okay? Thank you very much. Allah Hafiz.